3, 2, 1,
action. Sub-Saharan Africa is an area that experiences wars, political instability, natural disasters and more every year. Sure, these effects negatively impact production in the short run. That's not the end of it. These effects linger in the economy, leading to poor acting governments, market failure due to poor regulations and undeveloped financial markets, resulting in an overall misallocation of resources in the economies.
COVID is an example of a shock that drastically affected output and productivity across these countries. The uncertainty of the health shock caused firms to stop hiring and investing in fear of low revenue in the future. Due to this, the total aggregate productivity decreased amid resources being allocated to highly productive firms, resulting in and leaving other firms without the necessary resources to optimally produce. Moreover, the harsh effects of COVID caused the government to focus policies on emergency relief measures to protect lives, such as strengthening the health sector, securing the food supply, and enhancing access to water, sanitation, and hand washing stations. This served beneficial in the short term, reducing the death toll and amount of people hospitalised, but meant that not enough was done to protect the economy's future. This could have been done by addressing the human capital crisis, leveraging digital technologies for trade, and government effectiveness.
Development accounting literature tries to account for cross-country output per worker differences by taking stock of inputs per worker. In short, this paper suggests Sub-Saharan Africa experiences productivity gaps compared to EAP5 and Western countries due to poor levels of human capital, which leads to low TFP. This low TFP means production technology is used inefficiently, which when compounded by scarce resources translates into low aggregate labour productivity. TFP is an endogenous factor in the Roma model, where Roma seeks to internalise technology and human capital. The theories in this paper link to the Roma model, as TFP and human capital are discussed. As a technological change is the result of deliberative choices of individuals to invest in education and research and development and the existing stock of knowledge. Moreover, the paper indirectly criticises the solid model when it discusses the importance of TFP, which assumes that regional output growth is explained by the growth of factors of production, that is to say, capital stock, labour force and technology. At first, differences in output per worker were driven by undercapitalisation, with both human and physical lagging behind. Now, however, factor accumulation plays less of a role. Rather, the inefficiency in combining factors of production explains a lag in productivity through a reduction in TFP, leading to increasing resource misallocation. And why is misallocation of resources a major issue, you may ask? Well, it means that investment can easily disappear through low-quality investment projects, for example, which further stunts productivity growth in Sub-Saharan Africa. Indeed, the negative effect is further accentuated by the fact that public spending is hugely inefficient. One other point to note is that of structural transformation. In sum, structural lag occurs in Sub-Saharan Africa due to the sheer number of people working in the agricultural sector. In comparison to the rest of the world, the employment share in agriculture is declining more slowly, which means that transition to manufacturing and service sector jobs is for few and far between. Despite these points, however, this paper suggests a few ways to improve labour productivity. They advocate for policies to improve productivity in the agricultural sector, which will be discussed later in this video, and create jobs for youth to join the labour force as well.
Apart from TFP, policies and institutions can lead to resource misallocation in Sub-Saharan Africa, which then leads to losses in aggregate productivity. Before continuing, it is important to understand that these policies and institutions can lead to losses in aggregate productivity through three channels. The first channel, the technology channel, affects the productivity of various production units such as firms and farms. Secondly, the selection channel affects the number of operating production units. And finally, the misallocation channel drives the allocation of capital and labour among operating production units away from an efficiency benchmark. Although the report includes many policies and institutions, we have chosen to focus on two specific ones, as not only do they comprehensively explain the reasons for misallocation, but they are also linked to our course. Input subsidy programs are widely used in the agricultural industry to boost fertilizer use. Although they are found to increase crop yields and production levels, the positive production effects are significantly smaller than anticipated due to low crop yield responses to fertilizers by smaller farms. As well as this, the impact on production tends to only apply in the year the farms receive the subsidy. For example, in Mozambique, the impact of input subsidies on production and income appear to decay the year after the farmers receive their subsidy. As a result, input subsidy programs lead to a loss in aggregate productivity as farms cannot maintain levels of production after the year the subsidy was applied. However, measures can be implemented to increase the efficiency of fertilizers so that positive production impacts can be seen for longer than a year. Such measures include increased government spending in coordinated systems of agricultural R&D. However, this may require governments to rebalance their fiscal policy in order to avoid a fiscal deficit. Apart from this, most distortions in resource allocation caused by tax systems in Sub-Saharan Africa arise from informality. Informal firms are those that do not pay taxes, and they account for about half of total output in low-income countries. Informal firms are significantly less productive than formal firms. For example, businesses that report only 30% of their sales have on average a 4% lower TFP than those reporting a greater proportion of their sales. The presence of a large informal sector can be potentially damaging for an economy as it will limit the ability of policy making. For instance, if the government were to raise corporate taxes, unproductive firms will switch to the informal sector to avoid paying increased taxes. As a result, informality is a source of misallocation as it enables the survival of unprofitable firms, as they are able to avoid paying taxes by switching to the informal sector. This then worsens aggregate productivity as the greater proportion of the economy is made out of informal firms at the expense of the potentially more productive firms. Linking this to the cause, informality can worsen fiscal problems. As firms enter or move into the informal sector, the government loses out on potential tax revenue, and there will be a fiscal deficit. And a prolonged fiscal deficit leads to a high debt to GDP ratio. This can present a burden to future generations as they will be tasked to pay back the debt.
Underdevelopment of landmark institutions are potential sources of resource misallocation in agriculture across sub-Saharan African countries. There is strong evidence of capital and land misallocation in agricultural sectors known as land market imperfections. This can be pinned down to institutions governing land, as farm size in low-income countries can be distorted by a wide variety of institutions and farm-level policies. The distortion in farm size hampers agricultural productivity, which discourages the uptake of modern technologies. For example, in Ethiopia, they impose ceilings on land holdings and they partition farms that exceed the ceiling, hindering development. It doesn't help that institutional mechanisms for allocating land are tightly linked to inheritance norms and redistribution, as this tends to restrict access to land in undeveloped rental and sale markets. There are policy measures that can help in improving the performance of these economies. Farmers operating on marketed land are more likely to have greater access to other markets, like credit markets, and are likely to be substantially more educated than farmers without marketed land. This also helps the empowerment of women in these African farms, as with labour participation and market wages, a large proportion of these farmers invest in intermediate inputs and technology adoptions. A farm with average productivity in Ethiopia is 18.3% more likely to use fertilizer if it operates on marketed land. Removing distortions in land allocation generates not only static productivity gains, but also dynamic ones.